Say sundress.
How you doing?
What's Oh, you think you not cold? No, bro. You straight. You ain't all that. Got your little pine. You got your little pineapple. You thinking you all that?
All right.
Nigga just want.
I really don't.
It was a quiet summer evening in Harris County, Texas, the kind where the sun dips low and bathes everything in amber. The park at Cumberland Apartments stood still under the hazy glow, a community settling in for another peaceful night. Neighbors were winding down. Kids playing outside had retreated indoors, and all seemed calm. No one could have guessed what horror was about to unfold in the heart of this quiet corner of Cypress Station. At the center of the story is Mercina Struggs, a 29-year-old woman full of life and promise. She was a mother, a daughter, and someone whose warmth touched those around her. People who knew her described her as loving and kind, someone who deserved to grow old surrounded by love and stability. But what many didn't see was a storm quietly brewing behind closed doors, a relationship turned toxic, a man growing more volatile by the day. That evening, Mercina had gone to meet someone she once trusted, Nicholas Finley. Their relationship had been strained, tense, and laced with fear. Earlier that day, Finley reportedly asked her to bring him an insurance card. She did. But instead of a simple exchange, Finley allegedly hijacked her vehicle, leaving her stranded, confused, and terrified. It wasn't just a stolen car. It was a warning sign. Despite the betrayal, Mercina went back to the apartment complex, perhaps to get answers, perhaps out of love, or maybe a desperate attempt to make peace. She confronted Nicholas in the parking lot. Voices rose. Tensions escalated. Then, in a split second, everything changed. Finley pulled out a gun. In a heartbeat, instinct took over. Mercina ran. Her body surged with adrenaline as she dashed through the maze of buildings and sidewalks, screaming for help. Lights flicked on in nearby units. Neighbors peered through blinds, startled by the commotion. Some froze. Others ducked. The echo of gunfire shattered the stillness of the night. She ran to a nearby car, banging on the windows, trying to climb in, pleading with anyone, someone, to help her. But Finley was right behind her, and he wasn't going to stop. Not yet. Not until he had silenced her completely. In the worst kind of terror, Mercina collapsed near the vehicle, unable to run any farther. Finley stood over her, cold and determined, and fired several more shots into her body. According to witnesses, he didn't hesitate. He didn't look away. It was calculated, vicious, and final. Then, as if nothing had happened, Finley grabbed her purse, took her car, and drove off, leaving behind a lifeless body in a shattered community. The people who had watched helplessly were now crying, dialing 911, and praying it wasn't too late. But deep down, they knew this wasn't just another shooting. It was a brutal execution of a woman trying to survive. By the time officers arrived, the scene was soaked in grief and disbelief. Crime tape stretched around the complex. Neighbors huddled in silence, their faces lit by flashing blue and red lights. A mother was gone, another statistic in the growing tragedy of intimate partner violence. This is not just a story about a crime. It's about a woman who tried to escape, a man who refused to let go, and a system that's seen this happen far too many times. This is the case of Nicholas Finley. And this is what really happened on that quiet July night. Mercina and Nicholas didn't begin in violence. Like many relationships that end in tragedy, they're started with promises, warmth, and all the hopeful beginnings two people can share. To those on the outside, they look like any ordinary couple, laughing together, sharing moments, maybe even talking about the future. But slowly, as time passed, things began to change. What may have seemed like small signs at first, controlling behavior, sudden mood swings, a temper, grew into something far more dangerous. Family members and friends have seen this pattern before, but often, the victims themselves are the last to recognize the threat they're in. Love has a way of blinding, especially when it's tangled up in fear. Nicholas Finley wasn't just Mercina's partner. At times, he was her abuser. It's not clear when emotional abuse turned physical, but by the time Mercina decided to leave, the danger had already escalated. She was trying to break free from a man who refused to let her go, And in doing so, she found herself in the most vulnerable and deadly phase of any abusive relationship, the moment she chose to walk away. Experts say it again and again. The most dangerous time for victims of domestic abuse is when they try to leave. That's when threats turn into action, when manipulation turns into violence. And if there's a weapon in the home, the risk of lethality increases by over 500%. Mercina didn't just want out. She wanted her life back. And tragically, that was the very thing he couldn't let her have. After the shooting, Nicholas didn't panic. He didn't turn himself in. Instead, he calmly took her purse, got into her car, and drove away as if he hadn't just taken a life. The same car she had brought him the insurance card for earlier that day, now a getaway vehicle in a murder investigation. His escape wasn't rushed. It was deliberate. But freedom wouldn't last long. Law enforcement launched an immediate manhunt. Tips poured in, and within a short period of time, Nicholas Finley was located by Harris County deputies. He was arrested without incident and taken into custody. There were no tears, no resistance, just silence. Authorities charged him with capital murder, a charge that in Texas can carry the most severe penalties. When he stood before a judge, the decision was swift, no bond. He would await trial behind bars, facing the weight of a crime that had shaken an entire community. As the legal process unfolds, Mercina's family is left to piece together a life without her. Birthdays, holidays, even ordinary afternoons. They'll all carry the ache of her absence. Her child, now motherless, will grow up with questions no one should ever have to answer. And the community that watched in horror that night, they carry a different kind of trauma. The helplessness of witnessing a tragedy and being unable to stop it. In the days that followed, neighbors lit candles. Social media was filled with tributes. Her name was spoken with reverence and sorrow. She wasn't just a victim. She was a woman who tried, who fought, who ran, who shouldn't have had to. This is more than just a case file or a headline. It's a story of control, escape, and the irreversible damage one person's rage can cause. And while Nicholas Finley sits behind bars, the memory of what he took, Mercina's life, continues to echo far beyond those apartment walls. It started like any other ordinary Friday. July 19th, 2024, dawned without warning, without alarms. But for Mercina Struggs, this day would become the last she'd ever live. At some point that afternoon, she received a message from Nicholas Finley, her former partner. He asked her to bring him an insurance card. It seemed like a simple request, something mundane, almost forgettable. But as she pulled up to meet him, things quickly took a turn. Instead of a thank you or casual exchange, Finley reportedly hijacked her vehicle. He took her car, just like that, leaving her stranded, shaken, and unsure what he might do next. This wasn't just about a car. This was control. This was fear disguised in familiarity. Despite that moment, Mercina didn't run or call the police immediately.
She says the moment she heard gunshots, she feared for her friend's life. Yesterday, bullet holes are found on Shawnee Drury's front door.
It's right here. They're all of them are right here.
Her doorstop is where Mershana Struggs was shot and killed while trying to run from her boyfriend, Nicholas Finley. Drury recalls how it unfolded.
His lady got pulled over, and he needed her to bring the insurance card. And so my roommate took her to go down there, and he wasn't there. So when they came back, he was sitting right here in her car, and she jumped out and had a confrontation with him. And he shot her a couple times. My boyfriend pushed me back in the house, and we just went in the bathroom, and I just had my hands over my head, and it was so loud. I thought he was coming in the house because he kept saying he was going to kill everybody in the house. He was going to kill us for helping her.
Drury says Struggs fought to get away.
She made it into my truck, I guess, and he shot her 4 or 5 more times over there, and then she managed to make it over here. At that point, and he shot her like 8 more times. It was just so senseless, so senseless.
Sheriff Ed Gonzalez says murders involving intimate partners make up 35% of the murders in unincorporated Harris County so far this year. Leaving can be the most dangerous time for a survivor, and the Houston Area Women's Center says if an abuser has a gun, lethality can increase by 500%.
Instead, she returned later that evening to the apartment complex, maybe hoping to talk, maybe hoping he'd calm down, maybe just trying to keep the peace. But peace was no longer part of the equation. What happened next was fast and terrifying. At the park at Cumberland Apartments in Cypress Station, Mersina confronted Finley. Words were exchanged, voices raised. Witnesses would later say it sounded like a serious argument. Then, in one unpredictable moment, Nicholas pulled out a gun. The tone shifted from tense to deadly in an instant. Mersina did the only thing she could. She ran. She screamed for help as she darted between apartment units. People peered through their blinds, startled by the sounds. Gunshots rang out. The neighborhood, once still, was now under siege by fear. Mersina pounded on a neighbor's door. She made it to a car parked nearby, trying to open the door, pleading for safety. But she couldn't get in. Her body gave out. Her strength was running low, and Nicholas was closing in. Witnesses said he chased her relentlessly. When she fell, he didn't stop. Instead, he stood over her and opened fire. Again and again. The finality of it was devastating. He didn't just want to hurt her. He wanted her gone. She lay there, motionless, as the man she once loved turned into her executioner. The last thing she saw may have been the face of someone who was supposed to protect her. After that, Nicholas didn't run in panic. He calmly picked up her purse, got into her vehicle, the same car she had come to retrieve, and drove away as if nothing had happened. The people who had heard the gunshots could do nothing but dial 911 and pray help would arrive. But deep down they knew it was already too late. The moment Nicholas Finley pulled that gun, Mersina's instincts kicked in. She ran, not just out of fear, but with hope. Hope that someone would hear her. Hope that she could reach a safe place. Her feet pounded against the pavement as she weaved between buildings and stairwells, the echo of her screams bouncing off the apartment walls. Residents who had just moments before been watching TV or putting children to bed froze in confusion, unsure of what was happening. Then they heard the first shot. It was chaos. Some neighbors dropped to the floor. Others peeked through their windows. A few reached for their phones, fumbling to call 911 as more gunfire followed. Outside, Mersina was fighting for her life, literally. She tried everything. She banged on doors. She tried to climb into a nearby car. She called out for help again and again, but it wasn't enough. Nicholas wasn't far behind, and he was relentless. By this point, Nicholas wasn't just chasing her, he was hunting her. Witnesses would later describe how he moved through the complex with terrifying purpose. There was no hesitation, no remorse. He followed her footsteps like a shadow, gun still in hand. And while the community watched in fear, too scared to step outside, Mersina continued to run, even as her strength began to fade. At one point, her body gave in. She collapsed near a parked vehicle, likely exhausted, frightened, and in pain. What should have been a chance for someone to rescue her became the very spot where her life ended. Nicholas found her there, and instead of stopping, he stood over her and fired, over and over again. The shots weren't rushed. They were deliberate, cruel, and final. People who watched from inside said it was like something out of a nightmare. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. A man standing over a woman, unloading a weapon with cold intent. Her body, now motionless, told them everything they needed to know. There would be no miracle, no one to revive her. Nicholas had made sure of that. After emptying his gun, Nicholas didn't collapse or run into the woods in a panic. Instead, he calmly reached down, took her purse, and walked to her car, his escape route. The same vehicle he had stolen from her just hours before. He got in and drove off, leaving behind a scene so brutal it would scar the memories of everyone who witnessed it. The complex was still. No one came out right away. The fear was too great, the reality too raw. Police sirens echoed in the distance, growing louder by the second, but Mersina was already gone. She had run with all she had. She had begged, fought, and prayed. But in the end, Nicholas Finley had made sure she wouldn't leave alive. And with that final act, the chase was over, but the heartbreak was just beginning. As the final shot echoed through the complex, an eerie silence settled over the neighborhood. The air, once filled with Mercina's desperate screams, now hung heavy with shock. Doors stayed shut. Windows were cracked just enough for terrified neighbors to peek out, too afraid to move, too stunned to speak. Some had already called 911. Others were still processing what they had just heard. But for those who had seen the entire horror unfold, they knew she was gone. Nicholas Finley, calm and calculated, didn't rush. He reached down, grabbed Mercina's purse, then walked toward her car. Not a single glance back. No urgency, no panic. Just the quiet confidence of a man who believed he had time. He slid behind the wheel of the same vehicle she had once lovingly brought to him for an insurance card and drove off into the night. Like he hadn't just taken the life of a woman who had once trusted him. First responders arrived within minutes. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the complex, and the scene quickly turned into a flurry of movement and heartbreak. Officers moved with urgency, securing the area and tending to shocked residents. Paramedics checked for signs of life, but it was clear Mercina Struggs was beyond saving. She had died right there on the pavement, feet away from safety, from help, from the life she had been trying to reclaim. As detectives began piecing together what happened, witnesses came forward, trembling as they described what they had seen. The look on Nicholas's face, the sound of the gunshots, the way Mercina had screamed, begged, and run. Each testimony painted a picture of not just violence, but cruelty. And with the help of surveillance footage, license plate tracking, and witness accounts, law enforcement launched an immediate manhunt. It didn't take long to find him. Harris County deputies moved quickly, tracking down Nicholas Finley later that same day. There was no dramatic chase, no struggle. He was taken into custody quietly, as if nothing had happened. The man who had chased Mercina through that complex, gun in hand, now sat silently in the back of a patrol car. His calm demeanor only added to the weight of what had happened. Nicholas was charged with capital murder, one of the most serious charges under Texas law. In his first court appearance, the judge denied him bond. It was a clear signal. This would not be treated as a simple case of domestic dispute. This was premeditated, calculated, and devastating. The legal system was preparing to respond with the full weight of justice. But even as Nicholas was locked away, there was no relief. For Mercina's family, the real punishment had already been dealt. The loss of a daughter, a mother, a friend. For neighbors, the trauma of witnessing something so violent, so personal, lingered long after the sirens faded. What was once a quiet apartment complex had become the backdrop to an unimaginable tragedy. And while the wheels of justice turned, the grief was only just beginning to settle in. What happened to Mercina Struggs was not an isolated tragedy. Her story echoes the reality of far too many women. Women who are silenced in the very places where they should feel most safe. Behind closed doors, love sometimes turns into fear. Affection becomes control. And the person who once held your hand becomes the one you're trying to escape. Intimate partner violence doesn't always begin with bruises. It begins with subtle red flags. Isolation, threats, manipulation. And when those signs are ignored or misunderstood, they can escalate into something deadly. According to Sheriff Ed Gonzalez, roughly 35% of all murders in unincorporated Harris County stem from domestic or intimate partner violence. That's more than just a number. It's a crisis. Each percentage point represents a name, a family, a community torn apart by a violence that often hides in plain sight. And while Mercina's death made headlines, so many others do not. They suffer in silence, convinced no one will believe them, or worse, convinced that leaving will only make things more dangerous. And the sad truth is, it often does. Experts say the most dangerous time in an abusive relationship is when the victim tries to leave. That's the moment when abusers lose their grip and lash out with everything they have. It's the moment when love turns into vengeance and desperation becomes a weapon. In Mercina's case, she was trying to walk away, to build a life free from fear, but Nicholas Finley made sure she wouldn't make out alive. Weapons only intensify this danger. Studies show that if a gun is present in a domestic violence situation, the risk of the victim being killed increases by more than 500%. It turns a volatile relationship into a ticking time bomb. In Mercina's case, that gun made all the difference. Without it, she might have had a chance to escape, to get help, to survive. But with it, she didn't stand a chance. That's why raising awareness isn't just about talking. It's about acting. It's about checking in on friends who've grown distant. It's about listening without judgment when someone says they're scared. It's about understanding that abuse isn't always physical. It's emotional, psychological, and financial. And most importantly, it's about making sure victims know they are never alone, and there are people and places ready to help. Across the country, shelters, crisis centers, and hotlines offer lifelines to those living in fear. The Houston Area Women's Center, for example, provides resources, housing, counseling, and safety planning. And national hotlines, like the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE, are available 24/7 for anyone who needs a listening ear and a way out. Every call matters. Every life matters. Mercena's story is a heartbreaking reminder of what's at stake. She didn't just die because someone got angry. She died because a system of silence and shame let that anger grow unchecked. But by telling her story, we honor her. And by spreading awareness, we make it harder for the next tragedy to happen. Her life, and the lives of so many others, demand that we do better. After the horrifying event of July 19th, the legal system moved swiftly. Within hours of the murder, Nicholas Finley was arrested by Harris County deputies. The man who had calmly fled the scene in the victim's car was now behind bars, no longer a threat to anyone else. But for Mercena's family, his arrest offered no comfort, because the woman they loved was already gone. Still, the wheels of justice had begun to turn. Nicholas was formally charged with capital murder, a charge reserved in Texas for the most severe and intentional forms of homicide. This wasn't just a domestic dispute gone wrong. It was a calculated act carried out in cold blood. Prosecutors believed there was more than enough evidence to prove intent, including witness statements, surveillance footage, and the chilling fact that he chased and executed Mercena in full view of others. When Finley stood before the court, the judge wasted no time. Bond was denied. He would remain in custody, awaiting trial. The decision was rooted in both the brutality of the crime and the potential threat he still posed to society. It was clear to everyone this was not a man who had acted in the heat of the moment. He had hunted Mercena down. He had ensured there would be no escape. Capital murder in the state of Texas carries weighty consequences. If convicted, Nicholas Finley could face life in prison without parole or even the death penalty. These are not just symbolic possibilities. They are real, and they reflect the seriousness with which the justice system is approaching this case. Prosecutors will be building a case that not only details a crime, but the pattern of abuse and control that led up to it. As the trial approaches, Mercena's family must brace themselves for months, possibly years, of legal proceedings. They'll relive the worst day of their lives in courtrooms, interviews, and media coverage. And while they seek justice, they also carry the painful truth that no sentence, no matter how severe, can bring her back. Still, the justice system has a responsibility to do more than punish. It must send a message that victims of domestic violence matter, that when someone is taken in such a brutal and public way, the law will respond with full force, and that no one should ever feel they can take a life and walk away without consequence. In the end, the goal is not just to hold Nicholas accountable, it's to ensure that Mercena's story doesn't fade, that her name is remembered, that the legal process becomes part of a much larger reckoning with how we treat, protect, and advocate for women in dangerous situations. Justice, in this case, is about more than a courtroom. It's about honoring the life that was taken and fighting to protect the next one. What happened to Mercena Struggs wasn't just a tragedy. It was a wake-up call. Her death didn't come from a stranger in the dark. It came from someone she knew, someone she once trusted, someone who believed he had the right to take her life when she no longer wanted him in it. That truth should shake us to our core, because it means this can happen anywhere, to anyone, at any time. Domestic violence doesn't always leave bruises you can see. Sometimes it's silence. Sometimes it's isolation. Sometimes it's a voice whispering, "No one will believe you." And too often, by the time the world finally sees the signs, it's already too late. That's why telling stories like Mercena's matters. Not to dwell in heartbreak, but to break the silence for someone else who might still have time to get out. If you're watching this and you're in a relationship that doesn't feel safe, please listen. You are not imagining things. You are not overreacting. Love is not supposed to make you feel afraid, small, or broken. If your partner controls what you wear, who you talk to, where you go, those are not signs of love. Those are signs of danger. And you do not have to wait for it to get worse before you reach out for help. There are people who will believe you, who will help you plan your exit, who will walk beside you, no matter how messy or complicated the journey out may be. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is open 24/7. You can call 1-800-799-SAFE-7233 or visit thehotline.org to chat privately online. You don't have to leave today, but you can start planning for tomorrow. For those of us on the outside, friends, neighbors, co-workers, we must stop looking away. We must learn the signs of abuse and take them seriously. Ask the quiet friend how they're really doing. Speak up when something feels wrong. Offer your presence without pressure. Sometimes, just knowing someone sees them can give survivors the courage to take their first step to freedom. And for the system that so often fails women like Mercina, this case is a reminder that our response must be faster, stronger, and more survivor-focused. Protection orders, mental health support, and community resources must be easier to access. The cost of waiting, hesitating, or ignoring the signs is just too high. Mercina deserved better. They all do. So let her name remind us that this isn't just another headline. Let her story stay with us, so that the next time someone reaches out, we don't miss a chance to help. Justice for Mercina Struggs doesn't end in a courtroom. It lives on every time we choose to speak up, stand beside a survivor, or say, clearly, enough is enough. Thank you for watching this video. Telling Mercina Struggs' story has never been about shock or headlines. It's about honoring her life and making sure her voice doesn't disappear in the noise. She was more than a moment of tragedy. She was a woman full of light, love, and strength. And we carry her memory forward by making sure others know what happened and why it matters. If you've been moved by this story, take a moment to reflect, not just on what Mercina went through, but on the warning signs we so often overlook. Domestic violence is closer than many of us think. It exists behind smiles, inside familiar homes, in places where love was once real. It's not always loud, but it is always dangerous. This video is for every woman who's been afraid to speak, for every survivor who's still putting their life back together, for every neighbor who heard something but didn't know what to do, and for every life that's been lost in silence. We can't change the past, but we can change how we respond to the present. We can break the cycle together. If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please don't wait. Help is available. Call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE-7233 or visit thehotline.org. Support is free, confidential, and available 24/7. You are not alone. There's a way out. Special thanks to the advocates, law enforcement, and organizations working every day to protect victims and hold abusers accountable. And to the friends and family of Mercina, this video is dedicated to your strength, your grief, and your love. We see you. We stand with you. As the screen fades, we ask you to do one simple thing. Say her name. Say it with tenderness. Say it with intention. Say it because she mattered, Mercina Struggs. Let her story remind us all of how much work is still left to do. If you found this video meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe at True Crime Stories. Spreading awareness saves lives. Let's use our voices to protect those who haven't been heard yet. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay kind.